Yep. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Green New York Lunchtime Learning webinar series here. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. We're getting started right at noon today. We do have a little bit of a time crunch at the end, but we're going to try and get to all questions and anything else that comes up. So we'll just be cognizant of that as we go along. A few housekeeping items before we get into today's programming. Everybody is on mute when you join. If you do have questions or comments, please type them into the chat box. And again, we will get to questions at the end of today's webinar through the chat box. This edition is also being recorded and it will be put up on the Green New York website afterwards. So you can go back through and see some of the slides or hear something again or share it with your coworkers or others that might be interested in the topic. In addition, our next webinar is going to be on December 14th, and that's on going paperless in your life. So if you're sick of getting phone books or unsolicited mail or other voluminous tomes of paper that we don't want, that's going to be a good one to tune into. Again, that is on December 14th, and registration information is up on the Green New York website. So we'll get into today's topic. You are stuck with me for the entire session today. My apologies in advance. But today we will kind of wanted to do something different. So we normally on this series talk about a specific topic. So we're always focusing on something that might have been in the news, you might have heard about, might be a new community initiative or something. But today we kind of wanted to get back down to the level of how do we make change? Because if you're listening to this series, you probably care deeply about the environment and you want to go beyond just knowing about it to what difference can I make? And that's a very difficult question to kind of answer. It's very individual and personal for every person. But I wanted to kind of go through and talk about kind of the theories of how we make change and how you can become an effective change agent within the communities that you're a member of. So today's agenda, we're going to go over kind of what is a change agent, where can you make change, how to become one, kind of thinking about measuring your influence. We're going to go through a couple of examples today to show you kind of the thinking that we're going through, and some tips on how to keep motivated, because making change is hard. If it was easy, we would be changing all the time and the world would have flying cars and we would be living in a utopia, but we're not. And I think that's a testament to the fact that a lot of times there's a status quo bias, even if the status quo has issues, as we're currently seeing with a number of environmental and other issues that are facing us. So first off here is, what is a change agent and what do we mean by that? And the first kind of definition here is just somebody who is a catalyst for change. As I mentioned, the status quo bias is real and it doesn't change without a spark, without some reason to change. And so what a change agent is it's somebody who is that spark, somebody who starts that change, that transformation, somebody who asks the question, why can't we do it better? Or if this is a problem, why don't we solve it? You can also call a change agent the doers, the people who are doing the work, the people who are out there making sure that it happens. And in the picture here, we have an example of, from our own agency here at DEC, is we had these hard RSA tokens that folks had before we transitioned to the soft tokens. And somebody said, how do we make sure those get recycled? Instead of just either people throwing them in the trash or something else. And that was the spark. That person was a change agent. They went to the sustainability committee and they said, how do we make sure that these don't end up in the landfill? And from there, the process led to the committee collecting over 600 of these and making sure that they didn't go to the landfill. So that change agent, what they did was they asked that question. They went to somewhere where they knew they could hopefully get an answer, and that allowed for that change to happen. So who can be a change agent? Absolutely anyone. Change agents exist everywhere. We think of this a lot of times in a political context of change and, societal level changing, but they exist everywhere. So at your workplace, they exist in your community organizations, they exist in your families and friends groups, they exist on social media. Anyone can be a change agent within the realm that you have influence in. So that's one of the big things I really want folks to kind of take away from today is think about your networks, think about the folks that you interact with, think about where you have some power or some leverage or where you're a constituent or a customer of. And from there, kind of build it out and say, where can I make the most change? So So becoming a change agent, how does one do this? The first is stop doom scrolling, if you've heard of that term, and decide you want to get involved. The news is very dreary a lot of the times. There's a lot of negativity out in the world, and it's very easy to get sucked into just feeding off that negative energy and thinking that things are hopeless, becoming jaded, becoming cynical. But the first step to making change is to stop doing that and decide that you want to get involved. And we've seen time and time again that the folks who show up are the ones whose voices are heard and have influence. So the other thing that I want folks to kind of take away from today is, again, learn more about why things are the way they are, where you want to make change. So this is going to allow you to determine how best to use your time and energy to make change. So if you can understand the systems undergirding some of the issues that you're attempting to tackle, do some research into why we went down the road we did as a group in doing certain activities that might be environmentally harmful, that's going to help you to figure out where you can make the best or make the most impact in changing those. Other things you can do are joining organization and others that are working on an issue you care about. In a lot of communities, there are environmental groups working on different things. As well as groups working on all sorts of different issues that you might care about. And that's a way to get a good jolt of energy to see on the ground where people are, what's the landscape, and it'll really kind of bring you up to speed quickly. And I think one of the most important things here too is thinking realistically. So what do you have power to make change over? If you're reading the news and you're saying we need a new international agreement on climate change, it's going to be much stricter. We're going to solve this issue in the next 10 years. I'm going to be a part of it. You're probably going to end up disappointed. Should we do all those things? Yes, we should be working full bore on all of these issues, but it's going to take everybody working at every level and making change within the communities they have to get to that point where we're getting that large systematic change that we need in a lot of areas. So, you're going to get disappointed quick if you're shooting too high. Not to say that you shouldn't have high expectations, but have realistic expectations of what you can begin with. You can start making your change, and then you can build upon that. Because if there's one thing that change does is it begets more. Once people start thinking about how systems are working or why things can't be better, and once they start seeing that they have agency to make change, that really is when the momentum builds and the ball gets rolling. So thinking about your influence here is kind of the next step now that you've decided that you want to go out there and you want to make change. The first thing is to think about the size of your network. Think about, your friends and your family. Do you participate in social media? Do you have followers on there? Do you have groups or organizations that you're a member of? Pretty quickly, you're going to start to realize that within the communities that you exist, there's a lot of people that you can reach just from things as simple as posting about what you're doing or caring about on social media to talking to your friends and family at events about the issue that you care about, to making change within your groups, organizations, your employer, anywhere else. That starts to add up quick. And I think that's a very empowering feeling to go from, just an individual person who's thinking, how can I do this, to, okay, I have the ability here, 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 and here to help influence these organizations, these other people, and bring them on board. And then if you bring them on board, they're hopefully going to bring others on board. And it starts to snowball pretty quickly to making some real change. So the other thing to think about too, and I mentioned this before, is are there other groups working on the issue that you want to work on? So how large are they? Can you join them? That's going to be how you can get up to speed really quickly on a lot of these topics. So I want to go through two examples here today to show you a little bit about what this thinking is that I'm putting out there. So Change Agent 001, they're not up to 007 level yet, but they're getting there. So they live in a small rural community and they are alarmed at the science around climate change, but they don't really know what they can do about it yet. Most importantly, they then decide that they want to be a part of the solution. So they go through the thought processes here and they think about what they have control over and what influence can they have. So this individual, they work at a medium-sized company. They're a member of a faith organization and their children play soccer. They're neighbors with a member of the village board. and they have a large extended family. So this is what they're thinking about when they're deciding how they're going to make change. They also notice that none of the organizations that they're a part of have any kind of sustainability or climate policies or other initiatives. So here's what they decide they're going to do after going through this thought process. They're going to figure out how much time they can dedicate to making change, because we don't want to burn out super quick, and where they can make the most change in that time. So here's what they have decided. They're going to talk to their employer about starting a sustainability committee. If the employer's agreeable and they want to start going in this direction, they agree that they want to be the leader of this. And this might take up most of their time, and they're okay with that because they see that as system level change, working within a larger organization to increase its sustainability policies. That's something where they think they're going to get the most bang for their buck if they can do it. They also decide they're going to talk to their neighbor who's on the village board about having the village lower its carbon emissions. And this is a fairly simple one. I mean, this is a conversation that we have every day. We might not talk about these types of issues, but we do talk about people in positions of influence regularly. And sometimes it's worth having that conversation with them. This doesn't take that much time, especially if they've been doing the research, and they think they'll get some bang for their buck there. They also agree that they're going to talk to their faith-based organization about what they can do. And they've decided that if their employer doesn't start a sustainability committee, they agree that they have the time to then work on one here. So they've kind of prioritized what committee they're willing to lead or take on or work on. They also realize that at their children's soccer organization's next meeting, they have the ability to encourage folks to avoid single-use plastic cups and bags for games, and encourage parents to send things like oranges in reusable containers. This is a simple one. This is just standing up at a meeting, which again can be intimidating, but to make change, sometimes we do have to raise our voices a little bit and say, you know, this is a good teachable moment for our children. We can, you know, teach them about decreasing the amount of waste that we generate. And if we all agree to do this, and it becomes a league policy or something to use reusable containers, then we're going to make a difference. They also decide that they're going to make small changes in their own life. They're going to share them on social media and with their family and friends. And I think this is a big important one that Change Agent 001 here is doing, is they're making the changes. They're walking the walk. They're not just talking the talk. But instead of just doing them themselves, which has a benefit, they're trying to influence others to make those changes as well. So they're talking about their experiences. One of the things I like to point to here is that the biggest predictor of whether or not you will have solar panels on your house is whether or not your neighbor has solar panels on their house. These actions tend to be contagious once people see that they're realistic, that they can be done. And that's exactly what this change agent is going to do. They're not just doing it because it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do, but they're also ensuring that they're hopefully influencing others as well. They're also agreed that they're going to write a letter to the editor of the local paper about the issues they care about. And that's another way that they can get the word out, that they can hopefully reach others. That's also not a huge time commitment. So here's why they've decided what they have when they're thinking about making change. They were looking for the institutional change first. So making changes within their employer, their village government, their community organizations, because they know that's going to have the biggest bang for the buck compared to, say, individual actions. They also have decided that they're going to avoid burnout up front. That's not exactly possible for everyone. Sometimes we do drive ourselves to the edge and have to take a step back. But they came up with a plan to manage that, because when you're working on making change, burnout is a real possibility. And they're also still taking those individual actions, and they're also getting more out of them by sharing them with their family and their friends, like demonstrating something like a zero waste cookout when they invite folks over, and again, posting on social media and things to inspire others. They've also set themselves up with multiple pathways to success. So a lot of times when you're trying to make change, you go out there and you say, here's what I'm going to do. And you get a hard no the first time you try and do something, or you ask for something, and it feels really bad. If you don't have a backup plan, it can be pretty demoralizing. So I think one of the really important things they did here was they made sure that, okay, one of these pathways might not work, and that's fine, because there's other pathways as well. They're being persistent, they're being resilient, both within themselves to make sure that they're managing burnout load, and also to give themselves the best chance of success. So We got one more example here that I want to go through. We've got change agent 002. So we're working our way up the change agents. And this individual lives in a large city, and they're growing more concerned with the lack of sustainable transportation options that are available to residents. And most importantly, they once again decide that they want to be part of this solution. So they do some research and find out that there's a new organization advocating for more sustainable transportation options within their city. And they think about what they have control over and what influence they can have, just like the first change agent. And they realize they live in a large apartment building, they work for a small business, and they're a member of a local outdoors club. So change agent 002 goes through and they go through the thinking process that we laid out here at the beginning. So they think about how much time can they dedicate to making change and where can they get the most bang for the buck with that. And here's what they decide. They're going to attend the local sustainable transportation advocacy organization's next meeting. They also begin following them on social media to learn more about their campaigns. So they're plugging into the network that's already there, trying to make change and hopefully amplifying that. They also decide that they're going to ask their apartment building to create secure bike parking. It costs nothing except for a few minutes to email, building management and say, we would like bike parking within our facility. Or whatever the sustainability action is. They also have a discussion with their employer about what their business can do to support sustainable transportation. They also do a little bit of research to see what other examples of this that they can do, because there are a lot of ways. The big thing with this too is that a lot of times we get segmented and siloed, where we think about what does this organization focus on? And we kind of tune out all of the rest. And I think it's important for change agents to make sure that, especially on the environmental side, that we're voicing these issues and saying, hey, yeah, we do focus on this, but that doesn't mean we can't be a part of the solution via X, Y, or Z. Because as we're talking about here, we all realize how much agency we have to make change within our communities. And they also decide that they're going to mention the topic at their next outdoors club meeting and start a discussion of how they, as a group, can be part of the solution when it comes to sustainable transportation issues. So here's why Change Agent 002 made the decisions that they did. They wanted to join with others to advocate for change because they liked the camaraderie of an organization. That's not always going to be for everyone, but for this individual, that's what they wanted to do. So they found that organization and they got involved. They also wanted to make change, again, at the systematic level within the entities that they're a part of. So they're advocating for new infrastructure within their apartment building. They're working with their employer to see if they can be a part of the solution as a small business. And they're getting an organization that isn't based around transportation issues involved with their outdoors club, and getting them thinking about that. And again, the other thing they've done here, just like Change Agent 001, is multiple pathways to success. So there's different ways they can make change if one of these routes doesn't pan out. They're not going to be completely dejected. They're going to be able to still have some things that they can work on going forward. So the last thing I just wanted to touch on here before we get into questions and discussions is on staying motivated. And as I've said a couple times already, making change is hard. It can be grinding, it can be thankless work. But at the end of the day, we need to celebrate our accomplishments. We need to take stock in them, celebrate our wins, and make sure that that's what kind of fuels what we're doing going forward and gives us that kind of passion to recharge our batteries and to keep going. So one of the things that I like to do is kind of break up a project that you're working on or some kind of change that you're trying to make into different parts. So every time you cross a hurdle, even if it's just setting up a new meeting, getting somebody to agree to talk to you, maybe holding a first meeting with someone new, that's a win. That's something you can celebrate. You were not there before. That person was not thinking about this before, even if you didn't get the answer that you wanted. So just having that is a win. That's not getting you all the way, but it's something to celebrate that the ball is moving forward. So every time the ball goes downfield, you want to make sure that you're celebrating that a little bit because you're getting closer to where you want to be. And none of this change happens at once. I wish this was the world we lived in where you could just make a suggestion that makes sense and have it happen that helps our environment. But in most instances, we're working within established structures and we need to make sure that as we go through the different steps, we're taking stock of that. And the other big thing here too is having a support network. So you want to make sure that you link up with other like-minded people who are working to make change, because they're going to know what you're going through. They're going to be people that you can celebrate with, that you can commiserate with, and they'll hopefully get you through, and you can support them and they can support you. I think that's a big part of this, is making sure that you have that network of folks. And whether that's tapping into finding a local organization, talking to other folks that you know, or friends or family that might be working to make change, and seeing how that, being able to talk to each other and kind of lean on each other a bit. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining today's Lunchtime Learning webinar. I know it was kind of a more abstract topic today than we normally focus on, but I think it's a really important one, because when we look at all of the other topics that we have talked about, this is where the rubber meets the road, and this is how we actually get those into practice and making change through those. So I want to open it up to questions now. If folks do have questions, please type them into the chat boxes here. I also want to remind folks that this webinar is being recorded, and it will be up on the Green New York website in the next couple days. And I will put a link to that down here in the chat. So if you do have any questions or discussion points, or if you want to share success stories, please type those into the chat box. We do really like to hear about what folks are working on and what their experiences are as well. And so the first question I got here is, what is an RSA token? So those are security tokens to get onto the network. They used to be little electronic devices, and now most of them have switched over to digital. So it's basically electronics recycling. And let's see what we've got for our next questions. So we've got one here. How do you post on social media without sounding obnoxious and being unfollowed? I thought that was the entire point of social media. No. But I think for a lot of this stuff, it comes back to walking the walk without being preachy about it. I think if people see that you're doing something that's sustainable, but that you're also enjoying it, and you're not telling them you need to do this, or a polar bear is going to be harmed if you don't do this. I think if it's just leading by example, I think that's always the best way to go about it. So, if you start composting in your backyard, post a picture of how, say how great it was and how easy it was. And yeah, it's probably not too easy, but whatever your experience was, to be honest about it, and let people know that this is something that they in their own lives can do it as well. So a couple other questions here. With so many concerns about COVID and germs, how do you respond to folks' concerns about carpooling and public transit? So I think we're in a very unique place right now, I think, with the pandemic, and that's an area where everybody has their own comfort level, and we need to respect that. I think it's going to be different. In the past it was, hopefully in the future, and once we get through this time. But there's other activities people can take. So I think it's important to be sensitive to people's thoughts about the pandemic and their risk level, but also giving them other avenues. So if somebody's not comfortable carpooling right now, maybe there's other things they can work on if they want to be involved. We just mentioned composting, or different projects or things like that. So there's always different ways within people's comfort levels to do this stuff. And I think it's just meeting them where they're at and helping them get a little bit further. So some other questions here. What would be a good resource to start a project that turns recycled bottles into something new, such as the rugs that they've seen? So I think for something about, specific projects like that, I think, you can start to think about what other groups are in the communities. Are there any companies or other groups that help do things like that? And then just do some research and try and get yourself plugged into that and see You know, where could you set up receptacles for something like that? What types of organizations might want to be involved? Whether there's other community organizations, figuring out where they could go afterwards, and then having those conversations. And usually one of the things that I've always found is even just starting the conversation leads down some roads where you might not have thought of before. And you might end up with a good project or a better project because of those conversations. So another comment that we've got here is, I like your point about learning why the existing systems exist. Background is important. I also suggest spending some time discovering all of the connected systems. We have a bad habit of fixing problems in a way that only creates more problems. That is very true. There are a lot of what we call regrettable substitutions that have been made. So a lot of times, you know, the silver bullet fancy new answer might sound great, but it's worth digging into a lot of this stuff to make sure that it really is working for the best. And an example that they provided here in their comment was compostable cutlery is great if it goes to an industrial composting facility. If it's just going into the landfill, you're not getting as much of a benefit out of it. So if your organization is thinking about what can we do to lower our waste, and you're not sending your waste to an industrial composting facility, you might want to look at reusables or something else, as you're not going to get the benefit for that. So that's kind of thinking down the line one more step, and making sure that that can work. So any suggestions for where to start with an organization where not everyone understands science and environmental issues, and politics may influence their feelings about sustainability? And that is a very tough one. I think everything that exists in this in our society right now has become polarized. But I think the environment is one area where you genuinely have an in with a lot of folks who might otherwise not be interested in topics like this. And the reason I say that is because it's something it's a common asset. It's something we all have. It's real, it's tangible. And with a lot of the crises that we're facing environmentally, they're in your face. You know, we're having more extreme weather events, whether or not you want to attribute it to something or another. You know, you look at waste issues and other things, they're very common. So I think in those types of instances, I think it's focusing on the science, it's focusing on how it benefits the community, it's focusing on how being a part of the solution is good and it benefits all of the individuals within that group. And trying to pull it out of the political tribalism realm, I think, is the most important thing to do. And sometimes that's going to be possible, and sometimes it might just not be. But I think, you know, where you can find those benefits and focus on more on the commonality that we have with the environment, I think is really important on those types of conversations. And those are the most important conversations to have. So just looking at some other questions here, and make sure you do get them in. We've got another couple minutes here for questions and other things. Yes, if anybody does have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, whether on this topic or other topics as well. I'm happy to try and plug you into resources and other things. So even if it's off topic from what we've talked about today, feel free to email me and see how I can help you. I'm always happy to do that. Yeah, so one of the other comments that came in here for the question about other people is kind of co-benefits. So money talks in a lot of instances. So if your community organization is spending money on disposable plates and switching to reusables can save money, I think that's going to resonate with some people. You know, a lot of this we've talked about with social media posts and, you know, leading by example with friends and family and others. You have to kind of look at your audience and see what's going to make them want to be involved with stuff like this. And so different people are motivated by different things. And, you know, if your group is motivated by one thing over another, you know, focus on that, even though we do get the sustainability or environmental benefits out of it as well. So any final questions, make sure to type them into the chat box here. We do have one that just came in. What has this DEC done recently to support sustainability within state government? So if you go to the Green New York website, which I've put a link to the lunchtime learning page here in the chat, that has some great resources for agencies within state government for what they can do. One of the big things that DEC does is we work with all the agencies to bring them together to share resources, to share examples, to provide technical assistance through our Green New York Council, to provide trainings, information on renewable energy systems or electric vehicles, or anything down to the level of eradicating invasive species or doing green procurement or things like that. So I would check out the Green New York website. You'll find some good information on there about what we're doing to assist other agencies. So not seeing any more questions, I want to just say thank you to everybody for being on the webinar today. This is the first step towards making some big change. And hopefully, you've taken some good things away from it. And, again, we have our next webinars coming up on December 14th. It's going to be on going paperless. And if I leave you with one thing here today, it's nothing feels better than being a part of the solution. Stop the doom scrolling all the time. You still got to read the news, but when you can actually go out there and you can see change that you've made, that is the best feeling in the world. Even if it's just a small thing you've done, to be able to turn around and say, that is something that I helped accomplish that wouldn't have happened otherwise, and we're all going to benefit from it. That's huge, and that's the most uplifting thing ever. So don't let a lot of the bad news you might see out there get you down. There's a lot of good work to be done out there. There's a lot of people doing it. And, any questions or anything else, feel free to reach out and I can get you plugged into stuff we're working on. So thanks a lot, everyone. And we'll see you next month.